I absolutely remember in the spring sitting back and just watching it and really evaluating how things were growing, and I remember sitting there and I sat down in the garden and I started thinking back, like, how did it do the year before and the year before and the year before. And I did have like a really good year, but after that it's like I was just combating one thing after the other. So
Hmm.
we're done with it. I'm not even watering it. I'm nothing. I'm just waiting to do the work that needs to be done, which I've got
Yeah.
this urge to do now. So it may happen next week. I may start that process. I got the urge
Yeah.
in a matter of like 30 seconds yesterday. I was standing out there and I was like, it needs to happen now. So we'll see how that goes.
So the key about my garden being asleep, when you all hear this, my garden will still be frozen as well, right?
Yeah.
We can pretty much predict that. And there's a tinge of jealousy when you say, "Yeah, I may get out there and start working in the garden, next week."
Yeah. But
Um,
I mean, I'm just moving garden beds. I'm not
yeah,
planting
right.
anything or, I'm literally, I mean, it's the crappy work. It's lifting up the frame, moving it, and then building because it's on a little bit of a slope. So then I've got to build underneath it. It's a project that I'm not really wanting to do, but it's going to get done.
See, those things make like that's when I like call upon Batavia the builder,
Yeah.
and I really feel like I'm doing, you know.
Are
So
we adding another B into it now?
there's so many more. So I do want to take just a moment because I know we talked about kind of in the last episodes of 2024, the Wild Things Garden a bit. When I saw this on the list, I thought like when you opened up the episode today, you talked about how important are these goals to us, although we're not looking back at the list, not by design, we just don't. We still for some of these like we work on them because they're important to us. And the Wild Things Garden is such a good example of that because we talked about that both on air and off all throughout the year,
Yeah.
right? And again, you not seeing it, but that being a part of your reflection of 2024 when we closed out the year, like that's really telling. Like I actually also listened to the episode, right? So
Yeah.
last week's episode, last week's replay, and you can hear it in your voice, like you're going to give it one more go, but you weren't optimistic about it.
Yeah.
And it's funny when you mention the emotion part about it and removing the emotion, not that you carry a lot of emotion about the garden anyway. Like then when I think about our conversations in the second half of the year, they were absolutely emotionless. And I think you're also right about like just a little bit of annoyance. Like, let's be done with this already and move on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the emotion part comes in of like I did all this work and it's in there and I don't want to throw it away and waste it and
Hmm.
all that stuff. So there's definitely a bit of emotion in it, but for the most part, I mean, I had already been thinking about it and it just, I think one reason why I was able to follow through is because I mean, we legit made the episode and then I walked out there and was like, no, and even like I think I planted potatoes in there and they just didn't do well, which was
Hmm.
really odd. 2 years, and it sucks too because it was my son's potato bed and it just
Oh,
didn't do good. So, it is what it is, but we'll,
yeah.
it's going to happen. So, yeah, I'm glad that was on there because if not, that would have been, I may have had some egg on my face. And that's always the trick behind these too is like, did we actually even do anything? And we've been pretty good over the years, but as we
Yeah.
get deeper into it, I don't know.
And quiet is kept. That's one of the reasons, because there are a bunch of reasons why it takes me so long to develop the goals, because it's quite literally what am I willing to commit to in front of people.
Yeah.
And I know, you really shouldn't, you probably shouldn't, move around your life like that. Like, I only want to say I'm going to do it if I believe that I'm going to do it because now people have heard me say I'm going to do it. But I mean, that's just kind of real life, right? So this next one, it's funny because I stumbled into it and it's semi tied to the first one. For me, it's the stars of the garden are going to be root vegetables. It's going to be the year of the root, right? And so it's always the fine print, dedicating the equivalent to 2 raised beds worth of roots. And I put notes in carrots, sweet potatoes, meaning white potatoes, and onions as examples. And I stumbled into it because my garden plan already had root vegetables in it, probably by the time I made, this as a goal. But once I got into the growing season, completely forgot about it. So because my garden plan had it in there, I did meet the 2 raised beds, but I was intentional about it as it relates to the plan initially, and that's where it stopped. Like when you think about, okay, my fall planting, let's go back to my C plus for maybe now even a C minus for the first goal. My fall plantings, I could have came back around with more root. Absolutely didn't, because I didn't tighten up my fall plan and fall kind of flopped for me. But it also feeds into what we've talked about in recent months when it comes to storage crops for me. So you could see why that was a goal. So I am still eating white potatoes and sweet potatoes from the garden, and we are basically wrapped up with the onions. There's a shelf life for them. Um, so I'm pleased with that, right? And I don't know that it's going to be on the goal list, but it's definitely something I'm going to continue to try to do in my garden based
Yeah.
on the things we've talked about.
Well, that's good. I mean, you definitely knocked it out of the park with your sweet potatoes this year,
Mhm.
and
Very
you're
pleased.
still eating white potatoes, so that's good. Did you do carrots?
I did carrots, and I didn't mention them in this recap.
Okay, cool, cool. Good talk. Good talk.
I did carrots. I didn't. I planted them in a really small space, 2 by 4 foot space, right next to the garage. And again, forgetting that they were kind of the goal, I only planted them once in the spring. They did just okay. I didn't thin them, and so like things are all kind of twisted up. I did had an okay harvest, but I've had mixed results. I've read that you're supposed to leave them dry. Don't wash them if you plan on storing them in the refrigerator. And then I've seen people wash them. So I washed them. And here's the breaking news: I had so many of those carrots mold in the refrigerator. I've not said this out loud in public or even to myself when I talk to myself at home. I haven't said it then. It's just like more than half of the carrots that I pulled in, which would have been like midsummer. Yeah, they were no good.
So I'm taking notes. So now that we're on YouTube, everybody can see when I take notes. It can get kind of insane. Um, when
And
I do it,
ironically, you didn't know about that, and thanks for putting me on the spot. It would have came out at
well, you
some
didn't
point
have
if
to
I
say
did.
anything. I
Yeah,
mean,
of course I
look.
did, but here we are.
So two things. One, you were saying, and it is hard because we're held accountable for what we say sometimes and what we
Hmm.
say we're going to do. So that's difficult. And then two, you're under the scrutiny of the public eye a little bit.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that makes it difficult.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say is for my carrots, what I do is I wash them real good and then I
Hmm.
dry them and then I put them in a bag and you can put like a damp paper towel in there or something, but and just put them in the fridge and they do last a fair amount of time. So
I've
I,
had carrots last before.
yeah.
And I did that. I washed them really well. I set them out to dry right in between that point of when they're drying, but you want to get them before they start to go soft again, right? And so I put them in a plastic bag and I put like a tea cloth, like, a dish cloth and like a drying dishcloth. And I ended up having to throw the entire bag out because the carrots stuck to the cloth.